wait up.
Hello everybody and welcome to Industry Exchange. My name is Meghan Jones. Thank you for coming today. I'm your host. I'm going to be taking you through the ins and outs of marketing and branding with my guest here today. But if you were just tuning in and wondering what that lovely song was, it's actually called Wait Up. That's by raw Sacramento musician Clemone Charles. And of course, to hear more of his tracks, you can visit rawartist.com/Clemone. And that's like limone. Lemon, but with a C in front of it. So CLEMON. But like I said, today we are covering marketing, branding, business development for all you creative entrepreneurs out there. And with me is Brigette Young, right here to my left. She is the founder and CEO of a full service marketing agency called the Modern Muse Company. And of course, you can check that out online at modernmuseco.com. We'll have that down in the comments for you to check out, and of course later when we upload this to YouTube. So thank you so much for being here, Miss Brigette. I appreciate that.
I'm so glad to be here and so excited to talk to you.
I know, and we know each other outside of this,
yes.
So it's very great to interview a badass woman in your life, right? Who's doing all these amazing things and is like an industry expert. So I'm really, really glad to dig in with you today. But before we get into like the tips and advice segment, let's like paint a better picture of who you are, what you do, and what led you to start the Modern Muse Company. Yeah.
A little bit of craziness. That's usually where it begins.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I will cite that I do have entrepreneurial blood in my family, so that's just something I feel like I have to acknowledge. But really, I think where it came from was I was at a place in my career where, you know, I just felt stagnant. Mm-hmm. And I worked for a little marketing company, and what I was doing was great, but there wasn't really anywhere to grow. And I just was getting to a point where I felt like I needed a change. I wanted to be more creative in the projects that I was taking on, and I was sort of limited in my bandwidth there. And I had this sort of, you know, internal discussion that, you know, I weighed the options, right? Go work for somebody else.
Ugh. Yeah, cringe, right?
Do it for myself and see what happens. You know, and it's just that difference in energy. A lot of people are talking about energy these days and what takes energy and what gives energy. And for me, it was such a clear physiological reaction that I just felt like that's it. You know, that's the decision. And I did spend a good year preparing myself.
Good on you. It definitely takes that preparation for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So in that preparation, what were you thinking as far as like services you were going to offer your clients?
Right. I had become really interested in partnership promotions and the idea of bringing two brands together and how they could interplay. So that was a big inspiration for me. It was kind of an emerging world for me, and I know it had been established by those who did it before me and did it much better than I probably ever will, but it really was creative. Yeah. And that, and I loved events, and I wasn't really doing anything with events at the time. So those were sort of the things that got me fired up at the time. Mm-hmm. And I thought that's, you know, what I was going to focus exclusively on. What I discovered, in fact, that there was, you know, a need for those things very much. However, it was all the pieces interplaying together that most people needed. They needed to have somebody who could look at something and say, okay, here's where the gaps are.
Right.
And here's what you need to really optimize what you're already doing. Because most people are usually doing something.
Yeah.
So just figuring out, you know, how a full service agency could help with that. And whether it's, you know, again, the partnership marketing or event marketing or events, whether it's a sweepstakes or advertising help or PR or copywriting, whatever it is, you know, we try to service whatever the need is. And if we aren't an expert in something, we will bring somebody in that can help us. So
right, because everything kind of touches everything.
It
right?
really
in the
does.
Marketing world.
It should.
Yeah, right. If it all
Yeah.
just kind of be seamless. You
Yes.
don't really like necessarily know. So.
Yes.
So event partnerships, that's really cool. I love that. Do you have a particular project that you're like, I'm proud of having birthed this baby into the world?
Yes, there is one it's a funny one because it's pretty unusual, but I was lucky enough to do a rebranding campaign for a funeral home.
Okay.
Which most people, you know, kind of, what?
Yeah.
But it was a really unique project, and I cite that one because I think it was the most challenging in some ways. Luckily, I had a wonderful client who was very open-minded and progressive about what we could do to really create this new brand. But it was a family-owned business that had been taken over by a big corporation, and they wanted to rebrand it with a different name.
Okay.
And in that particular business, the factors that allow people to choose a funeral home are typically, where did my family go before?
Yes.
Proximity to my home, and then my budget. So we were overcoming a lot of things by rebranding it. And in fact, we made a great commercial featuring members of the community talking about their heritage, which again, my client allowed us to do. Worked with a great production company, a personal friend on that. She worked with me, which was great. So a little personal touch, which was nice.
Yeah.
We did some out of home with really beautiful photography. We did direct mail. But most importantly, we held events in the space.
Interesting.
Yeah. To get people to understand that the space had been renovated, it was beautiful, it was warm.
Okay.
It wasn't what they perceived
Right.
a funeral home to be. And that was one of my favorites because it was really just out of the box.
Yeah.
We actually at one point did some flower arranging classes that were totally free and held them in the community room that they had there. So that was one that I think just due to the fact that it was unusual and we had to get a little bit creative.
Yeah.
I loved that one a lot. Yeah.
Sounds very LA. Like, I'm going to an event at a funeral home tonight, like a funeral parlor. That's so interesting. And what, like, you know, I mean, we're all gonna die, not to like, you know, go there, but so true. And like, being able to be so transparent and really like connect with the community on that level is super important. Like, that's experiential marketing to like the next level. So
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah, I was just proud of the results of that. And then, you know, I've been fortunate enough to work with some really big companies like Live Nation and Cirque du Soleil and Pocket Watch, and they have been incredible, and their creativity is, you know, boundless. So those are some of my banner clients, I would say.
Yeah.
But I would say, you know, from a creative and sort of bragging rights perspective, those would top my list.
Yeah, I love that. No, like the creative aspect, you're absolutely 100% on that. But if you're just joining us, we're chatting live with Brigette Young here, founder and CEO of Modern Muse. So feel free, of course, contribute questions to this discussion. We want to know your thoughts, comments, questions, concerns on all things marketing. You can put those down in the section. Make sure you're following along too, of course, hashtag industry exchange, hashtag raw artists, with all those great things. But before we get into marketing, let's kind of take a step back and examine what an artist would be selling, right? And what they're selling is actually, that's then their brand, right? So how does one create a strong brand for themselves? That's pretty broad, but like, where do I start?
You start with your core values, and to me, that's going to inform, you know, everything that you do from that point. And you know, that sounds simple. It's not, because you should spend some time soul searching. You know, what matters to you at the end of the day? What do you want to put out into the world as a human, as a brand? Because especially as an artist, it's sort of synonymous, right? Or it can be. And so I think, you know, for an example, when I was doing my brand research, I came up with, you know, things like resourcefulness, honesty, playfulness, kindness. You know, those were things that mattered a lot to me in the work that I do, and I try to always keep to that when I'm, you know, whether it's a conversation I'm having or work that I'm putting out into the world. Try to remember those, and then of course from that you can kind of take the aesthetic component. What is my brand going to look like? What is it going to feel like when somebody sees it? Again, those things need to echo who you are. So you know, that's such a personal thing. You know, if you have hot pink hair and that is who you are known to be, maybe you want a hot pink logo too, you know, or that's your branding. For me, it was black and gold and white because I tend to gravitate toward things that are very classic, but with a bit of an edge. So I like to play with those colors. I could say, for example, that you won't see me using pastels in my branding because I'm not a soft or quiet person. I won't use fluorescents because I'm also not the loudest person in the room. But you know, those are silly examples. But really, I think it just starts with understanding, you know, who am I? What is my work going to embody? And how do I want the world to see that?
Things that it comes down to the color are telling people who you are. So,
absolutely.
Like making those small choices and really just putting words down on a kind of a verbal vomit of like, this is, I think that really helps you, right, better ideate what that is. So can you offer any tips on like telling your story well as a brand?
Yeah, I think, the first step is what we just talked about, just going through that process, which should frankly be a little bit painful. And that's how you know you've done the work, right? And then once you get to that point, it's being able to sort of attach all those things in a succinct and cohesive way. The average person has about 8 seconds attention span. Whether you realize that or not, that's the truth. So if you think about that, that's 1 to 2 sentences to communicate who you are and what you do. Or 8 seconds of visual. What can somebody read in 8 seconds? What can they watch in 8 seconds? So, my advice is this. I tend to be a very verbose person, probably not the best practice, but simple, succinct language that means something, that go back to your core words and your core values, and then just something that, is easy to understand in a very quick and intuitive way.
It's getting that elevator pitch down is like what I call
that's
it.
Exactly,
right?
that's exactly
it's like
it.
Getting your here's who I am, this is why you're gonna wanna buy from me, follow me, be a part of my brand, support me, etc. That elevator pitch is about 8 seconds. That also makes me think of that movie with Luke Perry back in the day, which was where you rode a bull. I don't know. Anyways, that just I just randomly thought about that. But that is not a very short amount of time. So make sure you're getting those visual aesthetics down for that 8 second gap. So how does one then identify their audience and places to connect with that audience?
Different people would tell you different things. I tend to always take a quantitative and qualitative approach. Okay. So I'm the mix of touchy-feely and data-driven, right? The easiest thing is if you have social media accounts or if you use Google Analytics on your website or anything like that, pay attention to it. Your audience will typically tell you who they are, and it may not be perfect, but what a lot of digital marketing experts will tell you is when they're doing ads and things like that, they will test it, and they'll run different types of creative and different copy and things like that, and refine and play with messaging and play with things. But eventually what will shake out is who you should be going after. That's kind of on the quantitative side. And it's, again, it's not perfect because you're not always capturing everybody, but it's a great place to start. And again, start without much of a financial or even time investment. On the qualitative side, if you invite people to shows or you post about it, when they come up to your table or booth or, piece of art or whatever it is, ask them where, how did they hear about you? Why are they here? What brought them here? Do your research, because you may have an intuitive sense of who your audience is, but you may be wrong too. And sometimes the marketing, the quantitative side will, tell you that. But I say, be curious, ask a lot of questions, figure out who seems to be your target demographic. And there really are so many types of groups, but, just start with something and keep honing that. Yeah, no, that's great. You also mentioned the in-person actually asking. And I think that's the first step is because that's also going to tie you to that person, right? Yes. They're going to be like, oh, I'm definitely had a conversation with that artist. And, so getting outside of the box there and connecting with the audience, I think is really important. And people want to know that you care. So if you just take that extra second to say, oh, what brought you here and strike up a conversation, you've already won points. So there's nothing to lose there. You're literally gathering data and forming, a relationship with somebody who's interested in your work. So yeah, and that's often great too. I think sometimes artists are afraid of how to start a conversation with people that are at the booth. They find it kind of awkward. They're not really a social person. Sure, that's a great jumping off point. Yeah, so, and you're just collecting data. So yeah, absolutely. So we have some questions coming in from the audience. Thank you guys for sending those in. We really appreciate it. We're asked for some examples of any brands or artists that you think are doing branding well these days. Oh my goodness, so many. I'm where would I even start? It's funny, weirdly enough, one of the brands that popped into my mind, just because I give them so much credit for their consistency, is Red Bull. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's something that they have just always done their thing and owned it entirely. And I don't know about you guys. I actually dislike commercials, which I should never say as a marketer, but I'm frustrated with many commercials. But when a Red Bull commercial comes on, I'm like, oh, cute. What are they doing next? Yeah. And then they've attached themselves to all of these awesome crazy, strange, out there, but super fun events. And I think it speaks to their personality, which seems to me to be very fun and just a little bit cheeky, but like there's just a lot of playfulness there. So that's the first thing that came to mind.
I love it. I mean, they do that thing where they fly the Flugtag or something, right?
Yeah. We're butchering the German language.
Sorry.
Nobody tell anyone.
Yeah, it's not like this is live or going to be recorded or anything. But yeah, that they do that strange thing. That's wonderful. You know what? I really like a Glossier. I don't know if you're familiar.
Their stuff is beautiful. Their aesthetic.
It's great. They're direct to consumer. They really got that on point.
Agreed. Second that.
So good. Another question. Amazing. Is there a difference between personal and business branding?
This is a good one for us to talk about. Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, I'm actually working with an author and speaker right now who, by the way, wrote a fabulous book about learning to connect to people, if that's something that causes trepidation for you. But yes and no, because you still kind of have to go through the same process, right? Of evolving and figuring out those core values and the aesthetic and everything like that. And we just did that with him. We built a website, we created his social pages, we updated his LinkedIn profile, we made one sheets about the book that he wrote and about his history as a speaker and as an author. And, a lot of those things are the same types of materials, granted, different perspective, but that you would create for a brand. So I think that there's definitely a lot, and, you may want to speak to this too, but I think there's a lot of things that overlap.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's very much, I'm in that same boat with you, because you definitely have to have that, you as a person are, a component of this brand, right? So I think that, if you're wanting to then later on, sounds like with this guy, you're wanting to paint him as like an industry expert. He's going to be, going out doing speaking things along those lines. Yeah, I think it's definitely important that you kind of have both honed down, because you're your own person outside of your brand. You're not your brand 100% of the time. That should not be that way. So yeah, I'm agree.
And I think the story is compelling too, right?
Definitely.
So, whether it's a brand, like, the example I would use is I work with a children's toothbrush brand, right? And when I started working with them, one of the first things I told the owner is that, you've got a great story. You've got to use your story, because he is the father of 4 small children and he is a nurse by profession, but he wasn't really touting that. And that's something that's really interesting in terms of, it paints him as an expert, personally and professionally. And I think that, again, that's something that could potentially apply to a brand, but also very much to a person. Your story is compelling to people. So how did you get to where you are? Don't be afraid to share those really interesting and possibly even vulnerable moments, just to, to make that connection. Yeah, no, I mean, I think we know it's all about like transparency and just being authentic, especially in this day and age with like trying to cut through all the noise, right? We were kind of saying that earlier, is like, how to be, doing that is to be authentic and telling your story and, sharing all your cuts and bruises and all the bumps along the way. It's what makes character. Yeah, no, it's very true. People relate to that. And people like to know that you're going through the same thing. So Raw, focuses on helping artists towards the beginning of the career. So let's chat a little DIY marketing, because I imagine that's kind of a little bit, nobody necessarily has an marketing arm of their own company. But what are some effective, low-cost ways of marketing your work? I like to refer to this as the universe of marketing. It's a little, I hope I coined it. We'll say I coined it. But I think it's the easiest way to understand it is if you can think of just a series of concentric circles, right? At the very, very, very core of it all is your brand. So all the painful things you went through to discover your brand and what that means and what that looks like and what that feels like. Owning your brand and creating simple brand materials like getting your social media up, getting your website up. A lot of that stuff, is, and we'll go into that a little bit more in a minute, but just owning your brand and having the brand be consistent across everything and trying to get as many things in place about your brand as possible before you really start going out into the world. Or if you're already out there, just start working on it now, but get your brand in place, because that will make everything else that follows so much easier for you. From there, people forget about this, but this is such a big one for me. Interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
You know, if you don't tell people what you're doing, they can't help you.
Yeah.
They can't champion you. And I don't mean just your immediate friends and family. I mean your extended network. I mean the people you go to school with, or your alumni groups, or your sports team, or whatever it is. Share what you're doing, you know, ask for help, put stuff out into the universe, because, you know, one of the toughest lessons I learned when I started my company was I had thought there were, you know, all these people that I'd worked with before that were just going to jump on board and work with me once I started my own company.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. It wasn't who I thought it was. But the more I talked about it, the more that people I never expected to come in and say, you know, why don't we talk about this opportunity? Or I have something, or could you help me with this? That came out of the woodwork. And that was from discussions that I had when I was just really honest about, hey, I'm starting this company.
Yeah.
This is what I think it's going to become, you know, everything like that. So I think leverage your interpersonal connections, you know, talk to people about stuff. Don't be afraid, because you'd be surprised who wants to come to your aid and really support you. You work, you never know. You just never know who you can, you know, meet or collaborate with, or, you know, do something cool with. And then, you know, the third tier I would say is, again, digital marketing, right? Because you can do so much of that inexpensively these days. You can start a website for free. You can create social media accounts for free. You can start an email database that you email people quarterly or monthly or whatever it is. You can start, I think all of those things for free are very, very low cost. And there's just so many opportunities to leverage digital media in a way that, you know, doesn't cost much. And then, you know, I know we'll get into this a little more, but of course, things like partnerships.
Yeah. So with social media, obviously, you know, being full of people promoting themselves, how do you create content that, you know, cuts through that noise, like we said? How do you, that stands out amongst the crowd?
I have a couple of rules of thumb. For me personally, I always advocate don't share unless you have something share worthy. You should be trying to create a cadence, so some regularity in how you post. But at the same time, just posting something to post something puts people off. And, you know, we all are inundated with a lot of everything, especially in a big market like LA or really any major city. So, you know, be thoughtful about what you're posting, be consistent, stay with your brand, exercise restraint. If it doesn't make sense for your brand, stay away from it, because people are following you for a reason, right? Or your brand for a reason. They're expecting a certain sort of content. And, you know, with social media, anyone can do it. Just do it better. Be engaged, write people back, you know, do giveaways on your site, create engagement, give people a reason, you know, ask them what they want to hear or see, you know, but just be engaged and really take responsibility for it. Treat it like it's a living, breathing relationship, because it truly is.
It really is. I mean, that's how, you know, most people are connecting these days. It's like, it's, you know, and going beyond that. And I mean, I think Instagram stories has really opened up that platform to be able to do that, you know, to be able to kind of, you know, it's beyond the post, it's beyond that. I mean, but it is a beast. You're constantly having to kind of interact with that. So, you know, we talked about partnerships. Obviously, I feel that that's your, you know, really like strong suit here. How does somebody spot like a partnership opportunity? Like, how would they even know what to look for and like make that approach?
Yeah, I think you know, there's a couple of different ways of going about it, but I'm old school, and I like to just do a, you know, we were talking about word vomit, just a brainstorm session, and might start with, you know, whatever comes to mind, and just do a very uncensored session where you just throw out everything that comes to mind when you think it would be so cool if I partnered with a company like. And one of the examples I was thinking of, you know, just even on the way over here was, you know, maybe you are somebody who paints, you know, pictures of athletic events or whatever it is, and you or outdoor athletic events or something, and you were like, oh, I'd love to work with Kind, but they're so big. Right. But maybe that's not the answer. You take it a step back. Maybe there's a local company making some sort of great product like that, you know, would love to collaborate. Maybe you design their packaging, and in, you know, exchange you get a year's supply of these bars. Like, you know, there's just so many ways to do it. But I think you know, brainstorm what your ideal is. There should be a few things in common, right? There should be a target audience in common. Okay. Your values, you know, hopefully overlap to some degree. And then the aesthetics need to sort of make sense together. So I think you should take those things into consideration and envision like a Venn diagram where there's an overlap somewhere. And just do a gut check. You know, it has to make sense. If you're an eco-friendly artist, you don't want to, buddy up with a plastic company.
Yeah.
Like, if you're vegan, you're not going to promote beef jerky.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
just within reason, right? So it has
Right.
to feel organic. It has to feel natural. And I think there's just so many out of the box ways to do it. I would also suggest that, if you have a partnership in mind and you're going to pitch it to somebody, know what you're willing to offer. That's usually a great starting point. So if you know that you're willing to do a post about their company on your social, or you're an artist and you're going to go paint a mural on a school and you want to ask them to share it in their social media and in their email to all their donors, those are all things that just kind of have a sense of where it could go. A good partnership will evolve over time as you discuss it.
Yeah.
But typically speaking, it's nice to have a couple things up your sleeve in terms of what you can offer.
Yeah, I mean, also, let's be honest, you want to show them that you really want this,
Absolutely.
right? So coming to them already with
absolutely.
having done your homework
Yes.
on what you want to bring to them, number one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And number two, on that company, like, hey, Joan with Kind Bars, I saw you did this event last year that blah, blah, blah. I think I'd really fit in well with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, those little things
Yeah.
will definitely set you apart. Yeah, I think it's like doing your homework.
It is. And I take notes when I see something that's done well
Yeah.
or a great idea. I'll take notes on it and just, keep that in the back of the, just the back of the notebook for, to go back to when I need
Yeah.
inspiration.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think homework is key in brainstorming, and you never know. And, you mentioned kind of digging into that pool of people that you know.
Yeah.
It's like, look at your LinkedIn. Maybe somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody works at whatever
Absolutely.
company that you want to be associated with and that you want to sponsor you. I don't think anything is without, outside of the realm of possibility. It's just
No, partnerships are it's another way to be creative and, just let yourself go with that and then bring it back and say, does it fit? Does it make sense? Is it reasonable for the consumer?
Yeah, that's awesome. So is there any online resources about marketing that you recommend artists check out?
Definitely. For social media, if you're not already using one of the apps that helps manage it, you don't have to use them. That's just a preference, right? And again, I think some of those are free at an entry level, but even things like Sprout Social and Hootsuite, they offer so many tips, so many really great pieces of information that I reference, that a lot of people reference. When it comes to social media marketing and just functionality, even because it's a changing landscape constantly.
Every day.
Yes. And then just in general, HubSpot, I really like some of the articles that they post. There's a lot of resources. I don't think there's a single question you can Google anymore and type in 2019 and not get a relevant answer. I'm trying to think, there are a lot. I also personally receive a Medium digest every day because I like to read about business enrichment. So that's my 5 minutes of peace in the morning before my day goes chaotic on me.
Yeah, no, that's great. The Daily Carnage is actually a newsletter I subscribe to. It's a marketing newsletter. I love it. It just gives me these little tips and tricks and articles to read. And then at the bottom, they have a really old ad from the 40s or the 50s or the 60s and kind of throw it back. So that's another good one that I like.
But WordStream too. WordStream's another good one.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's all about this research, kind of keeping up on it. That's it. Yeah, it really is. That's it.
Yeah.
Your job is done there. So we've only got a few minutes left. So I'm going to leave it with this last question. As somebody who's successfully grown a business from the ground up, what words of encouragement can you give to our creative entrepreneurs out there?
The biggest one is just don't give up. I mean, it sounds so simple, but if you have started your own business, you know that it is not. What's the statistic that 30% of businesses fail within the first 3 years, 50% fail in 5? If you've started something, you've already done something amazing. So just remember that. You've probably already done the hardest part. Keep going, learn from your mistakes, and just try to figure out what you can do better in an evolution. It should always be an evolution. You're never going to make everything perfect overnight. So just make a little bit of progress every day. If that's one task from one to-do list, for one project, so be it. But start there and gain that momentum, and then take breaks when you need to. Because especially with creatives, right? If your energy is tapped, 1 hour of you doing great work is the same as 10 hours of junk work. So take breaks, let yourself refresh, because you know,
Yeah.
you're just not doing your best work if you're exhausted.
No, man, you're talking all kinds of. You're speaking my language right
Feeling
now.
kind of personal.
I'm like, oh yeah, I need to work on myself, and like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's very good advice. And I mean, that's truly what it is, right? Your brand is you. You are part of your brand, vice versa. So if you got to be working on those kinds of things. So, but thank you guys for watching. Thanks again to our guest, Brigette Young here.
Thank
you guys
you.
can check her out, of course, online. Like we said, you can find it in the YouTube description. Her website will be there. But it was great advice today. Obviously, a topic I'm pretty passionate about too, so I love sharing that with somebody. This was the last industry exchange of the year, y'all. I can't believe it.
Sad.
I know. I'm really sad, but ending it on a very high note here.
Thank you. Yes.
But we are going to be back, of course, the last Tuesday of the month in January of 2020. But until then, enjoy your Thanksgiving, enjoy your happy holidays, I hope, and of course the new year. And we're going to be right back here in 2020. Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye.